Hi guys, Shaquita here from Crown Me Quita, and in this video I'm going to show you how to turn those jeans that are now high waters into shorts. Let's get into it right after this intro. Oh, but first, let me warn you. My husband, brother-in-law, and son are downstairs watching the game, and you are going to hear them in the background of this video. It is what it is, but the show still must go on. Okay, now let's jump into the intro. So the supplies that you will need are as follows. You'll need the jeans that you intend to alter and change into shorts. You'll need fabric scissors, a chalk for marking your seam allowance, a ruler of some sort. I prefer a clear ruler. You'll need thread. I'm using 2 different colors to match the different types of thread within the jeans. You want to go based off the color of thread that's in the jeans already. And of course, you'll need your sewing machine. Step 1, mark your jeans to the desired length that you want the shorts to be. There's 2 ways you can do this. One way is to actually put the jeans on and mark them based on how they fit. And another way is to use a pair of shorts that you already have and mark it based on that length. So I'm going to use my clear ruler here, and I'm going to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to mark it with my chalk, that blue chalk down there, and then I'm going to cut it. Let me pause right here and explain to you guys why I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. With these shorts, I am doing a double hem at the bottom. So what that means is I'm going to fold it once, iron it flat, and then fold it again so that the raw edge is hidden. And then I'm going to stitch. So I need about a 1/2 inch of fabric in order to execute a double hem. So with this clear ruler, the big squares equal 1 inch and the smaller squares equal a 1/2 inch. So I know based off this line, I'm marking 1 inch, and based off this small faint line here, I'm marking a 1/2 inch. So I'm gonna take that white mark that I already have, lay it on that 1/2 inch line, which is right here. And then I'm gonna mark that with my chalk along the edge of the ruler, and then I'm gonna cut along that line with my scissors. So this is what it looks like once I've marked the 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to cut along that line. When cutting, you want to make sure that you have the pants folded in half with the hems lined up and the seams lined up, and you want to cut through both legs at the same time. This is going to ensure that both legs are the same length. This is what it looks like after cutting. Now we just have to finish the edges by hemming them, and I'm going to do a double hem so that there's no raw edge hanging out or visible. This is a raw edge. I decided to get a pair of jeans to kind of show you what I'm mimicking. This is what my hem is going to look like. So for this, you will need push pins and an iron. So you're going to start by turning your shorts inside out and then lay them flat. So you want to remember your 1/2 inch seam allowance and remember that white mark that you created. This is where we want the shorts to stop. So I'm going to do my first roll and make sure that white line where I marked for guidance is right at the fold. I don't know if you can see that. The white line that I marked is right at the fold. And as I'm folding this, make sure your seams are lined up. What do I mean by that? This is a seam. So you want to make sure that that's lined up so that the shorts will fall properly. When I fold this, the seam on the outside needs to align with the seam on the inside so that it's all lined up. So once you get everything lined up, as it should be, you're going to iron it in place. And now, this is where my second roll is going to come into play. So one thing that I use to guide me for the second fold, I take this raw edge and I fold it all the way down to meet the crease of the first fold. Then I flip and iron flat. And this is just gonna hide the raw edge. That's when you take your pins and pin it in place. And so now that 1/2 inch seam allowance that I left out earlier, that's what I'm using to create this double rolled hem, so that I don't lose any of the length that the client wanted. Because if you don't use a seam allowance, the shorts will end up being shorter than what the client requested. You'll lose a 1/2 inch in length if you don't include a seam allowance. Does that make sense? So I'm going to continue to pin and iron flat, and then I'll come back to you once I got that done.
So here are our finished shorts ready to head to the sewing machine. Guys, use as many push pins as necessary, because the push pins is what's going to ensure that your fabric stays in place as it goes beneath the presser foot of the sewing machine. So please, there are some people who can sew without pinning. Please believe me when I say I am not one of them. Use as many pins as necessary, okay?
Now we are ready to sew. Make sure you change the thread out in your sewing machine to match the thread in the shorts that you are about to sew. Make sure you have your pin holder handy and a pair of scissors. If you have a sewing machine where you can remove this piece, go ahead and do so. So you're going to take the leg of your shorts and put it around this part of the sewing machine like so. I've taken the liberty to go ahead and sew one leg. So make note that if you are sewing a material that stretches like this is a stretchy denim, you want to make sure that as you are sewing, you are stretching the material at the same time so that it can maintain its stretch. If you do not stretch the material as you are sewing it, it will lose its stretch. And once you attempt to stretch it, the thread and the stitching will pop. The alternative to stretching the material as you sew it is to use a zigzag stitch. If you use a zigzag stitch, you don't have to stretch the material as you sew. For what I'm trying to accomplish here, I don't think a zigzag stitch would look good. So I'm choosing to stretch as I sew. Let's get into it. And I want to point out to you that when you start sewing, you want to sew your stitch at the very top of that fold. Okay? And as you're sewing, you want to make sure that you stop and remove the pins as you go. If your needle hits a pin, it'll break your needle. So you want to start by taking the needle out in the area where you want to sew, lowering your presser foot, which I've already done, and then you want to start with a back stitch. Back stitching is going to ensure that the stitch doesn't come loose eventually. So you back stitch when you first start, and then you back stitch when you end. All right, so starting with my back stitch. Stretch the fabric, sew. Stop, remove the push pin, stretch the fabric, sew. Stop, remove the push pin. So right here I'm coming across a seam, so I want to lower my needle so that I can raise my presser foot without making my stitch crooked. And I want to make sure that the seam is flat under the presser foot. Otherwise, you'll end up with the seam being sewed kind of sideways and crooked, and it'll create like a pleat in the hem that you'll be able to see from the outside of the shorts when you wear them. So let me remove this pin. Stretch. Sew. Stop, remove the pin. I'm gonna remove 2 pins this time. Stretch the material. and sew. Remember, if you are sewing a denim that does not stretch, you don't have to stretch the material as you sew. Remember to twist the shorts around as you go, just to make sure you're not sewing any creases into the shorts. Whenever you hear that loud noise, I'm just going over a seam and the fabric is thick in that area, so nothing to worry about. And this is the last needle I have to remove. So I'm going to sew all the way until this stitch meets where I began stitching. And I'm going to end with a back stitch. So typically I overlap where I began stitching and then I back stitch. With the type of machine that I have a button that I press up here for the back stitch. So I go forward once more. And we're done. Take it out. Clip off all of your extra thread, both inside and out. You're going to have pieces of thread hanging inside and out. Flip your shorts right side out. And examine your work. Make sure you don't have any places where it's lifting and it didn't quite sew all the way through. And if you don't, baby, you're done. So let me give y'all a close-up of what the hem looks like at the bottom of the shorts. I'm going to show y'all what it looks like as a whole. And here are the finished shorts. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see the hem. Remember, this is a fabric that stretches, so where it looks like my hem isn't straight, that's because I stretched it as I was sewing. But when the client puts these shorts on and it stretches around the circumference of her leg, that stitch will straighten out. So again, here's the before and after picture of what we've accomplished, and I hope you enjoy your new shorts.